very much for joining the Sex, Aging and Wellbeing panel discussion, which I anticipate will be very interesting, very exciting, with a lot of open and unadulterated discussions on sex. The current social environment, as we know, and the devastating toll that COVID-19 is taking in terms of human lives, the volatile political environment, that's not gone beyond us. We are hugely cognizant of the reality facing us today, and we hope to emerge from this pandemic having learned a lot of painful lessons, but with hopes of new thinking, reinstating people's values and contribution to society and their place in society. And in this vein, we are discussing one element of adulthood, and that is of sex and well-being in later life or advanced years. We are looking towards the future and in a post-pandemic society and the rights and privileges of older adults and individuals are as relevant to the topic of sex and aging as it is to medical safety and welfare. So we have a fantastic panel for you today, and I'll start by introducing Adam Lewis, who is CEO of Hot Octopuss. And Hot Octopuss is a multi-award-winning company founded in 2007. And Hot Octopuss designs innovative, cutting-edge sex toys that look gorgeous and work with everybody. And the strap lines for Adam's company, Hot Octopuss, are fantastic. Show stigma the finger, and pleasure for everybody. And Adam has been CEO of this company and is best known for their product called Pulse. And Pulse is the world's first male vibrator. Am I right, Adam?
Yes, we call it a vibrator.
A vibrator, which has had hugely positive impact for men experiencing sexual or erectile dysfunction. And Adam has been core to developing all of Hot Octopuss's products, considering the wider market. So thank you, Adam, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Our second panelist is Dr. Louise Newson. Well, there's so much I can say about Louise, but I'll try to make it as short as possible. Louise is a GP and menopause specialist who feels passionately about improving education around perimenopause and menopause. She's written loads of articles and editorials, and in 2019 launched her first menopause manual with Hayes Publishing, which went on to be a bestseller on Amazon. Louise has worked regularly with West Midlands Police and many other large organizations to provide advice regarding menopause in the workplace. And she's also the director of Newson Health Limited, a menopause and wellbeing center in Stratford-upon-Avon. And she's also set up a not-for-profit company and is involved in research at Warwick University, London School of Tropical Medicine, and also King's College in London. Yeah. Impressive bio, Louise. And then we come to Samantha. Samantha Evans, who is co-founder of Joe Divine. And Samantha co-founded Joe Divine, an online sex toy company, with her husband Paul in 2007. She's a feature writer for Joe Divine and is passionate about sexual health and pleasure through using safe sex toys and sexual lubricants. Having a professional background in nursing, Samantha understands that many healthcare professionals receive little or no education about sexual health and intimacy and pleasure for their clients and their patients. And despite that, the fact that many medical interventions, health conditions, and diseases impact upon the individual's sexual function, intimacy, and pleasure. So Samantha, too, is a regular writer for leading websites such as Good Housekeeping, Glamour, and has regularly featured in articles in The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Independent, the Daily Mail, Daily Star, Daily Express. So a huge spread. And she's also featured on radio, including Women's Hour and Channel 5 program, How to Have a Better Orgasm. So, my sterling panel, well, thank you very much for joining us today. And we kick off. So at the top of the list really is the whole concept that sexual health, interest in sex and intimacy stops at some point in midlife. 50. We don't know. But what are your thoughts? Why are these assumptions made, and why is it negatively impacting on the quality of life for social sex?
Okay, and what about this? Okay, so we can do
Sam, whilst you sort out your acoustic problems, I'm going to give my thoughts on that question. And you know, the perception that sex stops at 50. Well, it's a case really that. It's the way that media portrays sex and sexuality. And everyone knows, you know, that sex doesn't stop at 50. It's a complete misconception. But it's the way that society portrays sex and sexuality, in the way that they like to cover the topic, the pictorial images that goes with the subject. You know, it's all very stereotyped. It's all very much young and beautiful people. Sex over 50 just isn't covered. It's not a topic that people want to talk about, it seems. And it's not a topic that people particularly want to hear about. And I guess it's just the misconception from people that are younger, that you know, people get to a certain age and they lose their sexuality. And it's just, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but it's just a load of nonsense. There's no reason why that should change, or people's bodies change, people's mindsets change. However, there's no reason why sex and sexuality needs to stop at a certain age. So personally, my personal feeling that the biggest reason that there's this misconception is because sex and sexuality over 50 just isn't covered. It isn't discussed, it isn't written about, it isn't broadcasted, and therefore the world just assumes it doesn't exist. And I think that is the fundamental issue here, is just the lack of discussion and acknowledgement of sex over 50.
And I think I'd like to add that I think people do change after the age of 50. As you know, the average age of the menopause is 50, and during the menopause, our hormones, estrogen and also testosterone in women reduce. And with that, there are lots of psychological symptoms, but also physical symptoms as well. And so it's not just an age-related stigma, there's a menopause stigma as well. And a lot of women find that their libido reduces, not just because of having menopausal symptoms, but just the way that their bodies are changing as well. And a lot of women who I see in my clinic tell me that they have low self-esteem, they have reduced self-worth, they have low energy, they have poor sleep. Their bodies often change because of the low hormone levels that occur. Women tend to put on weight. They have muscle pains, joint pains, headaches, recurrent urinary tract infections, and then they have physical barriers such as vaginal dryness, which occur in around 70% of women. So all of these added together, I think, are huge barriers to women over the age of 50 actually being able to explore their sexuality in a way that they should do. And certainly they often feel very embarrassed talking about it. And we know from figures from research, around 70% of women have vaginal dryness, yet only around 7% have treatment, which for me as a clinician, knowing there's very easy treatments that's very safe, is absolutely shocking. And some studies show that even when it's brought up in a consultation, only 50% of women come away with treatment. So there's so much that we need to do, even before thinking about actual penetrative sex. Before that, it's looking at why the barriers, what's happening. It's not just because we've been with our partners so long that we're getting fed up with them. It's actually different, and we need to actually be thinking about the menopause and the effects of hormones on their bodies, and I'm sure Sam would agree with me on that.
I completely agree. I'm a menopausal woman and I really like sex, but the things I actually have to do to enjoy it, and Louise and I, we share practical advice that people can actually implement into their sex lives. And the problem is they go to their GP and they're not getting that practical advice. They're being told to use a bit of KY, which is the worst thing you could possibly do because it's a terrible lubricant. And this is my frustration, is people come to me and they go, I can't believe that you've just given me some simple advice and tips. And actually that's completely transformed my sex life. And it is also talking in confidence, talking about normalizing it in a professional manner. Because going back to what Adam said, whenever you see older sex portrayed on television or film, it's often done in a very tongue-in-cheek manner. It's always done in sort of an ooh and misses, or it's quite cheapened sometimes. And actually Netflix have really done a lot to improve that, which is really good. But general mainstream media and TV, it's always, you know, it's always made out that the woman, she's an old woman, she must be a cougar, but the man is a stud. And, you know, and people are quite mocked for the fact that they're older and they're actually enjoying good sex. And actually the sex you see is not the real sex that actually happens in people's bedrooms. But for me, the simplest thing is actually recommending a good sexual lubricant and vaginal moisturizer to completely transform someone's sex life. It transformed my sex life, you know, and that is so simple. But as Louise said, people are not getting that information. And on the other hand, we're told that women don't want to have sex, understandably, during the menopause and beyond because of these physical and mental health issues. But a lot of women come to me to buy a sex toy because their partner's got ED. And often then they'll buy a sex toy from us because they want to carry on enjoying sexual pleasure. And then they'll come back and they'll buy the Pulse, which is brilliant because they tell us that their partner's actually experienced erectile dysfunction. So we say, there is a male vibrator that you can use with your partner. It will help his erectile function. Have they got diabetes, heart disease, prostate health issues? So that's actually a story that we never ever see in the press. The fact is that there are women who really want to be sexually active, and it's actually their male partners who are unable to be sexually active because they are experiencing erectile dysfunction.
Jackie, we can't hear you.
Right, sorry.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I was saying, I certainly agree with Sam's comments because, you know, the thinking is that often women are the ones who have issues around menopause, but a lot of women go through menopause with increased sex drives. It's not only about dysfunction, and then there's a whole issue, and if you could throw some light on this for us, is there something about the therapies associated with menopause that can actually exacerbate the problems? Because and reading some of the literature around menopause, we understand that a number of GPs prescribe antidepressants, things like sertraline, which are known to depress people's sex, you know, libido.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's two issues here. I mean, generally, libido reduces during the menopause because estrogen and also testosterone, which although it's the male hormone, women produce more testosterone than estrogen before the menopause from their ovaries. As they decline, libido often declines as well. But some women have an imbalance in this decline. So some women find their estrogen falls more than their testosterone. So relatively speaking, although their testosterone level is still low, it's proportionally higher. So some women actually, like you say, have an increased libido. So it varies so much between women. But we know from all the evidence that for the majority of women, taking HRT has more benefits than risks. And it should be taken forever in the long term because you're replacing the low hormone levels that occur forever, because once we go through the menopause, we can't replace those hormones. Sadly, a lot of women are still offered and given antidepressants because one of the very common symptoms related to the menopause and perimenopause is low mood, anxiety, reduced motivation, poor sleep. So a lot of women are incorrectly diagnosed with depression and given antidepressants, and there's no evidence that antidepressants help for the low mood associated with the perimenopause and menopause. But one of the problems, as you say, with antidepressants is that they can affect negatively libido. So women who have low libido anyway are then being given a treatment that suppresses libido even more. Also, some types of hormone treatments, such as tablet estrogen or the contraceptive pill, because having oral estrogen actually inhibits the way testosterone works in women, can also lower libido. So women who take tablet HRT, as with the estrogen, actually can often find that their libido reduces despite having an improvement in other symptoms. So it's very important that women have individualized help and care regarding their menopause. And it's really important that women talk about libido problems and sexual problems, because it is sort of thought of that it's a bit naughty to talk about it, and actually it is a natural function, and it's really important that we're not made to feel bad about it. You know, I've been in medical conferences and people are sniggering and laughing about sex, and actually it shouldn't be. We know that actually couples who have regular intercourse have better health, better mental health, better physical health, better well-being. So we've got to almost man up about the fact that sex is so important. And it's, you know, sometimes it's not even talking about penetrative sex. A lot of women tell me that they're not holding hands anymore. They don't want to be hugged. They don't want to be acknowledged, almost, because they've changed so much as women. And I have a lot of women in my clinic who are from same-sex partners relationships. So if both of those women are going through the menopause at the same time, then it's doubly or even probably more than doubly bad. So we need to look beyond the box, really, and think more about what we're doing and how we can help people to talk.
So what can we do to turn up the volume on this? Yeah, because I mean, all of us recognize that, you know, as Adam says, it's a load of rubbish. Yeah, that people stop having sex at 50. You know, how can we change that? What is required?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is for us as individuals to be empowered and actually to help. There's so much more. When I was a junior doctor and a medical student, it was very paternalistic medicine. We would go to the doctors, you would get your prescription, and it's very much what the doctor told you to do. And thankfully that's really changed, and we need to share the decision making, and we need to be empowered as patients. So I think we almost have homework to do as patients to be able to have the right information that's evidence-based. We need to present it with our doctors or our healthcare professionals. It might be a nurse, it might be a pharmacist, it might be someone else, and actually explore the options. And if it don't feel right, then we need to either see someone else or push back and say, well, actually, I've read that antidepressants might not be the right treatment. And it's also trying to get over this embarrassment. You know, if someone has a erectile dysfunction as a man, or if they have vaginal dryness or something's causing pain, but it just happens to be in the vagina as opposed to on their finger, they shouldn't be less sort of more embarrassed about presenting with it. You know, if I had a rash on my arm, I would show my friends and talk about it. But there's something you can't talk to your friends about, how little sex. And, you know, a lot of people, don't get me wrong, but a lot of men will talk about how much sex they have. Mm-hmm. But actually, around 70% of women I see in my clinic haven't had sex for at least 2 years. And I'm sure their male partners won't be discussing that in the pub, but they need to, because if they do realise that they're in the same boat, then they can share. And, you know, a lot of what Sam does is listening to women's experiences and saying, well, this worked for that woman, and this worked for one of my other clients, and actually, why don't you try it? And a lot of things are very safe, and there's a lot of stigma, and I'm sure Adam and Sam will agree with even using sexual toys. It's almost a bit dirty and it's a bit seedy.
Can we take it to Sam then? Sam, let's hear you. What's happening?
Well, definitely. I mean, our products are recommended in the NHS. I'll have to say, Adam will know this, that female sex toys designed for the female body are much easier to sell to healthcare professionals than male sex toys. We have a women's health brochure that gets given out across the country, which is created in the NHS for the gynaecologists and women's health physio. We also created a men's health brochure last year, and I have to say we've had no sway with that whatsoever. I find it quite frustrating, because I think the pulse is fantastic, and to get that in front of urologists, you know, who are dealing with men who are going through prostate health issues or, you know, other erectile issues, because it's very, very clinical, that sort of pathway. Whereas if you actually talk about female sex toys, then it's a little bit more acceptable. But you know, the fact is, a lot of healthcare professionals, once you actually tell them about the sex toys, show them, tell them why they shouldn't be recommending certain sexual lubricants because of poor ingredients, then they actually want to know. It's actually, some people don't open up the conversation about sex in their clinics and the GP practice because they don't know where to go with it next.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to tell people to go to the high street. They have no idea what to recommend. You know, we advertise in women's magazines. Some GPs keep the adverts in their drawer and they'll whip it out and go to this company, you know, go and buy one of those. And that's brilliant. You know, make sure you're having regular orgasms, which is just brilliant. I love it when someone says, oh, my GP told me to buy one of these toys. I think it's so proactive.
Yeah.
It's all part of training. It was never part of my training. But I do feel there is a, you know, the gender bias is very much there. And when I take the pulse out to female talks that I do, because I say, well, this is great for non-penetrative sex. And then people are always so fascinated. When I go to psychosexual therapy events, you know, the pulse is the one thing that gets picked up all the time because it's just brilliant. I'm going, and I feel like saying, but you're a psychosexual therapist. Why don't you know about this toy? You know, it's part of the work that you do, which is why it's great to go out and educate people and actually talk about it in a practical way. But, you know, that's the thing. It's simple things. Like women phone me up and they have not had sex for such a long time. Their relationships have broken down. It's really, really sad. And actually just to say there are really simple, inexpensive things you can do. The toys are safe because they've all been tested. The materials they're made from have been tested. You know, so unlike medication, which often has sexual side effects, the toys don't, as long as they're skin-safe toys. Because don't get me wrong, plenty of used and fake products out there made from really, really not very nice materials. So I think that is my take on it, is that it's a lack of training, and that's why I do the talks that I do for healthcare professionals.
Absolutely. Adam?
Yes, well, I mean, I agree with Samantha. There's a huge lack of education amongst the GB community, especially about male sexual health and what's available outside of the purely clinical sort of side of things, what's available from sort of novelty manufacturers like ourselves that some products such as the Pulse is so well suited to addressing some of the needs of these patients. So, and also, you know, there's a huge stigma attached to any kind of adult novelty designed and aimed for men, let alone then you add the sort of senior aspect to it, and you kind of have two taboos: the fact that you have a male toy, and then you have sort of the senior aspect attached to that as well. I mean, from my perspective, from my perspective is, you know, from a commercial, how do we address this? I think one of the ways is to actually take the topic of senior sex and put it front and central, and actually write about it, do stuff around it. May it be, you know, writing articles, maybe getting the message out there. I think that's the most fundamental, that it is talked about, full stop. And I think the more you talk about something, the less the less sensitized, more desensitized the subject becomes, the less stigmas attached to it. But also, I think it's the way that senior sex is portrayed, and this is something that's very close to Hot Octopuss's heart. You know, senior sex is something that we write about, that we pictorially talk about. And when we look at the imagery that we use around it, we try very much to have real youthful images attached to senior sex, because just because you are of a certain age doesn't mean that you've lost your youthfulness. And I think that's a big misconception, that old people cannot be youthful. And that's a complete misconception. You know, my grandma used to be the naughtiest girl in the room most of the time, you know, when she was in her 80s. That was just her personality. And I don't think that is portrayed enough when we're talking about senior sex. The images are very much sort of dreary grey kind of images of very old people kind of trying to be intimate, and this is something that we don't think is necessary at all. So if you look at the imagery that we use of senior sex on a Hot Octopuss, they're all people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, but they have a real youthfulness about that, and I think that's something that the younger people can really connect to. When they see these people, yes, they're senior, but they have that youthfulness that they can empathize and share. And that's something that we're very much trying to address in the way that senior sex is portrayed, that it's not in this dreary, old, kind of fashioned way, but in a very much youthful way, very much something that is akin to what the younger generation see and face in the images that they get. And if you go onto the website, you'll see us portraying senior sex in exactly the same way that we would portray, that with the younger age group.
Well, can I just go back to that as well? I mean, the Octopuss website's great, and that's something that we try and do, trying to get nice imagery as well as of older people, but I get frustrated because I get followed by a lot of sex toy companies that are just setting up all the time, and you go onto their lovely, shiny, clean website, and then it's just all young people, and it puts people off. It's actually older people are going to think that's not for me. When I see sort of, big brands with women, in doing fashion as well, and I'm going, it's aimed at my age group. I'm 52, and quite frankly, she looks like she's 30. Please use age-appropriate models, because I think this is really important. And I find it utterly frustrating. They go, oh, we're all inclusive, and I often say, well, you're not inclusive because you're actually ageist. You may actually be LGBTQ plus inclusive, but you're not actually including older people because you don't have them represented on your website. And that instantly puts people off. I think that's why we've found a niche within magazines, though I have to say magazine print is dying out, and therefore doing adverts in certain magazines, you do get a demographic of the over 50s, 55s plus. And actually because they're attracted to that. And also, not everybody's online. So this is the other thing as well that I think we forget with the older people is that the older generation, not everybody's online. We still get checks and postal orders in the post every week. People phone us up because they like to check out that you are a real company, and not everybody feels comfortable ordering online, even if they are online, because they may be on a shared computer. They might have a tablet that they share with the grandchildren. So we often hear that as well. And again, it's the whole marketing side of it is actually you're not actually being inclusive, though you think you are. You're actually missing a trick a bit because, we know that these things actually work, and we know that our customers like that. But definitely imagery, it drives me potty as an older woman getting older that, we're not portrayed in that way. It's always it's always sort of the sad, dowdy woman. And I've written articles about this because I just find it quite frustrating.
Could part of the problem be that we might actually be consolidating the myths and the misconceptions and the stereotypes if we couch this as an issue with age, around age? Sexuality is an adult thing. Legal reasons from a certain age. If you are deemed as an adult legally, you have a sexual life. Yeah, we have a national sexual health strategy that often tends to focus on people earlier on in the life course. The sexually transmitted disease, the pregnancy sort of issue, that sort of education, the policy directives around that. However, as you progress later along the life course, as we've said, there's a tendency not to recognize and not to see the need or to understand that sexual health issues in terms of pregnancy for women who are premenopausal, because women are getting pregnant later on along the life course, in terms of sexually transmitted diseases. When you look at the evidence around the range of men in the later life who are contracting STIs, gonorrhea and syphilis and women chlamydia, all that sort, there's a lack of recognition that throughout the life course that there's a need for sexual health policies, strategies, education, and so on. So should we be adopting an approach that as an adult? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think when you think about sexual health, it's often thought about teenagers, unwanted pregnancies. Then, you look at the time and the energy that's focused on care of women who have a lot of face-to-face consultations with different healthcare professionals, whether it's for contraception, whether it's for their smears, whether it's for mammograms, whether it's for their pregnancies. And then suddenly, after the age of 50, they fall off a cliff. The menopause is very neglected, and a lot of people feel it's just related to symptoms. They don't realise it's going to happen, and we're with this forever because it's a long-term low hormone deficiency status which will continue with us. And a lot of women should find the menopause as a liberating experience, because for a lot of women, if they have children, they'll have grown up. A lot of women maybe haven't got the same financial constraints or constraints from older family members. So actually there's a lot of sexual freedom for older women that perhaps you didn't have if you had teenagers or young children running around your house, and they are unable to actually have this sexual liberty that perhaps they wanted, and they're too scared to know what to do about it. And if you look at some of the rates of sexually transmitted infections, there is a peak over the age of 50. And so although it's great, women don't have to have contraception. I think that's probably the best. There's two good things about the menopause. You don't have periods as a woman, and you don't need to worry about contraception. But other than that, it's really very negative if you don't have the right help. And so there's a lot of, there should be a lot more work really trying to let people have the information and knowledge. And the amount of women I see and speak to who tell me that they haven't gone for their smear test because the last one they had was so painful. So if a smear is being painful, sex is painful. So therefore anyone who's undertaking the smear should automatically be giving information about vaginal dryness, about libido, you know, do you have a partner, is it painful? Because then it extends to, maybe it's not just sex that's painful, maybe it's sitting down, maybe it's cycling, maybe it's wearing underclothes. And, you know, it's a whole big narrative that needs addressing. It can't be just pushed under the table because, you know, women are here to stay, and vocal women want to stay vocal. We don't want to be suppressed. And just because we're menopausal, not heard of, because the menopause affects, I mean, hopefully I'll live for decades. So it's going to be far more encroaching on my life than it was having 3 pregnancies or being a teenager exploring my sexuality. So this is something I think we have to talk about. And it affects all women. So, and it indirectly affects all men. If men know someone who's a woman or work with someone who's a woman, then they have to know about the menopause too. So we can't ignore that.
Indeed. Adam, from the male perspective, you know, we're talking a lot about women and menopause and the impact of menopause on female sexuality. What impacts on male sexuality? And, you know, what are the issues? How do you design? How do you innovate for guys? What, you know, you say what's happening in your space?
Sorry, I muted myself. Children, you see. Well, look, as you become older, our bodies no longer quite often behave quite the way that they used to. And the opportunity for things such as erectile dysfunction to come along is plain. It's not necessarily often that you're getting older, but often when you get older, you have certain other conditions to which you take medication, and they then have an effect on your ability to maintain an erection. And so when you get to a certain age, as a man, it is inevitable that sooner or later, may it be continual or just on a case-by-case basis, that you will suffer from erectile problems. And that's just a matter of course. Now, how those erectile issues affect your sex life is very much down to the individual, but also the education that individual gets. You know, when the first thing that especially in today's day and age, is that you turn to Viagra or some kind of a ingested medical treatment in order to address that. But not everyone can do that. People with high blood pressure, or people who are just, you know, not that way inclined. And often that's where the education ends, or the options end, especially if you go and see a GP who are often uneducated in terms of what's available on the market. So from a Hot Octopuss perspective, it's can we create products that provide an alternative to what something like a Viagra would do? And in our cases, yes, we do have products. The second issue is educating the senior market on what products are available to them, because you know, they're not marketed to the senior community as much as they should be. So although senior people within the later years might see products out there, they're not sure, they don't believe they're targeted for them, they don't believe that that's suited for them, because the imagery, because the way that it's marketed, you know, it's very much focus on this much younger segment. So when people of an age go onto a website and they see all these young people, they just don't think it's right for them. And I think that's a key problem here. It's about ensuring that all these great products, which are great for all market, for all ages, are also targeted at the senior market, so that they can have images, that they can have a copy that is relevant to them, so that when they see a product that potentially does have a benefit for them, that they actually see that it is for them and it is designed for them, and it's not just because they're 55 or 60 that it's not suitable for them. And I think that's a big thing. A lot of the products that are out there are suitable for them, but are not made on, I guess, positioned in a way that when a senior sees them, that they are aware that it is suitable and potentially addresses some of their issues.
So should society, Samantha, should society give, for me, there's a certain level of lack of permission, that society does not seem to give to, adults in later life around sexuality and intimacy. You spoke about, a woman in her 6th or 7th decade of life wanting to have a partner, seeking sexual, intimacy or relationship, being seen as a cougar, whereas for a gentleman, you keep going, mate, and that's the sort of, Is there something about the market? What does the market look like? What is the potential size of this market? Should society give permission, allow people to experience life to the full in later life? What does that look like?
It's massive, because we're all going to get old and the population's living longer. So people are having sex at an older age. As I said, our oldest customers were 95. And the thing for me is that older people get pigeonholed. And just want to go back to what Adam said about, toys that people think that they're not suitable for them. I often get asked by journalists, so what toys do older people use? I'm going, the same toys that young people use. Absolutely. And that's the thing. I find it quite frustrating. So we don't have a list of toys. Obviously, there are toys that can help with erectile dysfunction and vaginal tightness, and decrease sexual sensation. But they're the same toys that young people would use as well, people of any age. So I think it's actually stopping the ageism, view. It's actually saying that, because I have to say a lot of my older customers are having much better sex lives than a lot of younger people that I know, and that's really important. And using that, giving people permission, we've talked about sexual health, Louise has talked about STIs. That's the conversation I have quite frequently. When I hear people are in new relationships and I say, oh, are you using condoms? And they're really quite shocked. They go, well, I can't get pregnant anymore. I go, yeah, but you can get an STI. And I have advised people who've had STIs. So, again, I spoke to a very large condom brand and I asked them, they said, we've got a really, our website and our PR is great. And I'm going, oh, that's great. So you've got older people in your advertising. No, because they're not our demographic. Now, quite frankly, when you've got brands like that, selling condoms who are saying that older people aren't in their demographic, they're missing a trick, because older people need their products. So I think we have to have this societal change. For me, it's actually very much journalists. Some of them are brilliant, but some of them just don't get it. And I've been misquoted, and I'm sure other people have, about what you do and the things that you do. And that's the thing about it. We do need to keep talking. It's great to have articles. It's just, I've written so many articles about older people and older sex, but it's actually getting those articles published in a way that actually is sensible, is practical, is not done in a sort of a tongue-in-cheek way as well. So I think we are missing a trick. We just need to include everybody. We have to stop the ageism and the ageist comments about older people, because the population's living longer and lots of older people are having sex, and good sex as well.
If I can add commercially, I mean, anyone who says that the 55 plus is not in their what did you call it, Sam? In their demographic, I mean, just craziness. I mean, it is a demographic who is shown to be incredibly interested in sex and sexuality, and it's a demographic who have a lot of money to spend. So for anyone to say that, I mean, it's great for the likes of Sam's business and mine, because we seem to be one of the few who've seen this great opportunity. So I don't want to shout it out too loud, because for us it's a great niche. But the truth of the matter is, this niche isn't so niche at all. It's actually a huge segment. The only reason it's niche is because only few few of us in this sector are actually catering to this market. So for Sam and I, it's great. Let it remain the best kept secret. But the truth of the matter is, it's a load of nonsense. And any marketeer who says that it's not in their demographic should have their headset tested, because it's in such a great demographic with so much disposable income, and also a demographic who's desperate for information, and desperate for knowledge, and desperate to be marketed to. And you can't say that about other demographics. So it's this real misconception, this fake stigma that's attached to it. And as I said, long may it stand for the Sams and the hot octopuses. But for the truth of the matter, for the community's sake, it's just complete madness.
You're missing the trick. Missing the trick. Yeah, absolutely. And very strong words. And Louise, to wrap things up, yeah, just if you can give us your thoughts, your whole thoughts about this. How do we, for you, what's key post-pandemic?
Yeah, I think, well, even during the pandemic, it's a really good opportunity for us to get the knowledge and information. And certainly there's a lot of us now, people are reflecting about their well-being and their health because we've got time, which is something that we're very poor of normally. So I think it's really important that people, firstly, as I've said before, don't feel embarrassed or ashamed. It's very healthy to have a sex life. It's very healthy to have a libido. And, sex is personal, and it's different meanings, different actions for a lot of people, but it's something we need to explore and develop. And we're fortunate we can access information now from our homes, and it's important that it's spoken about. And anyone who's suffering with menopausal symptoms, which is contributing to their reduced libido and sexual desire, then they should really receive help, because there is a lot of help out there, but sadly you have to try and seek it. But having knowledge as well, and as you may know, my website menopausedoctor.co.uk does have a lot of information about the menopause. It's all evidence-based, it's non-biased, so it's a good place to start, and then to explore what's available is really important.
Okay, thank you. Sam, what are your final words during post-COVID? How do we change this going forward?
I think we just have to keep talking about it. Obviously, my website, Joe Divine, there are over 400 practical sexual health and pleasure articles on there. I'm trying to offer practical advice, from a nursing perspective, but also, just normalising sex, talking about older people and sex. And for me, actually educating healthcare professionals, so when they're older, patients, pop up in their GP practices and there may be an issue, then they actually feel comfortable in opening the conversation, because this is the problem. It's often left upon the patient to actually open that conversation, or they don't have the right words to describe what they're going through. So we have to change the mindset of healthcare professionals too. So, but as Louise it's an amazing resource that Louise has, and again, Joe Divine has done the same too. So there's actually lots of practical advice out there if you actually know where to look, but you do need to know where to look. So, hopefully going forward, we'll get, many older people who want to carry on enjoying pleasurable sex, or start enjoying pleasurable sex, then they should be able to if they want to.
Okay. Adam?
Well, I have to echo Samantha. I have to echo Samantha. I think educating healthcare professionals is front and centre, because often, the elderly are happy to go to their GP and want to go to their GP to ask for advice. And if they're not positioned to have the information, then as Sam says, they're left to their own devices to go onto the internet and find resources. So I think that's front and center. And then I think it's the responsibility of companies such as Hot Octopuss, who are involved in sex and sexuality from a commercial perspective, to continue to drive this message across. A big thing on our website is show stigma the finger. Well, this is front and center from us. I mean, look, we don't just do it purely from an altruistic perspective. As I said when we talked about the last comment, this is a really lucrative market. It allows us to differentiate ourselves. And the cherry on the top is we're able to then create something really good on top of that our customers benefit from. So I think, it's a responsibility, not just from the healthcare, but also from those solution providers from a commercial perspective, to actually include this group and to market to them, and to provide content, educated content, thought out content, research content that's actually going to be educational and helpful. Yeah, so that's my final thoughts on the matter.
Very much. Just to summarize, I think, you know, what came across during the discussion was some very strong views, and rightly so, about the misconceptions. I think we all agree there's a huge amount of myths and hidden aspects of it, society failing, society and I might add, healthcare professionals failing to acknowledge the sexuality of people at a certain stage of the life course. I think there's, as Louise mentioned, huge amount of physiological and psychological stigma around women in the menopause, and how that impacts on sexuality and sexual health and relationships, quality of life on the whole. Current very much agree that there's a whole issue of embarrassment around it. When I did my master's degree, I looked at the literature around healthcare professionals' attitudes to sexuality and sexual health of older adults. Absolutely despaired. But we live in a very sexualized world, and why sexuality should be the realms of people early on in the life course, I think we need to address that. And for me, the huge frontiers around this that we still need to address, because sexual dysfunction is not the realm of older adults. You know, you have young men and women who have head injuries, become paraplegic, who have things like MS, you know, all forms of physical disabilities, for whom sexuality, sexual health, and intimacy are huge issues, and would really benefit from some of the products, you know, that you spoke about. And for policymakers to recognize in the National Sexual Health Strategy that the older population needs to be addressed. Yeah, there's huge health issues emerging from that. So I would love to say thank you very much for a very insightful discussion. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Louise, very much for taking part. And please do stay well and look after yourselves and your family.